Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Seeds and Weeds podcast, brought to you by Small House Farm. Join us as we talk with gardeners, foragers, herbalists, chefs, and community activists to explore the many ways that plants impact our cultures and cuisines, our history, and our future. I'm your host, Bevan Cohen, and this is Seeds and Weeds. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. We got a good one for you today. We're going to be hanging out with Sarah Thrush to talk about canning, food preservation, and her brand new book, Preserving with a Purpose. You might already know Sarah. She's got a pretty large following on TikTok where she shows folks all the different ways that they can preserve their food. You can find her over there at Sarah Plain and Tall. I'm pretty excited to have Sarah on the show. You know, we first met at a Mother Earth News Fair, maybe down in Texas, but she's actually from right here in Michigan. She's an expert in all things canning, so it is super awesome that we have a chance to learn from her and pick her brain a little bit. Food preservation sort of been the theme around here lately, it seems. It was just last month that my book, The Heritage Pantry, came out. I don't get nearly as in-depth with the canning as Sarah does in her book, though. I mean, that's for sure. But I do get to explore some other food preservation methods like smoking and salting, dehydrating, fermentation. So food preservation has certainly been on my mind. I've been sharing some recipes and other things from the Heritage Pantry over in our Patreon community. I recently shared my famous basil tomato sauce. Tomato season is coming on strong all of a sudden here, and it is time to start thinking about getting that canner out again. And in tomato news, we just started picking our very first Blue de Provence tomatoes. Now, you might remember me talking about these tomatoes after that trip Heather and I took to France last year. It is a super cute, bright pink little tomato with dark blue shoulders, and I'm happy to say they have done very well for us, and we should have plenty of seeds to offer for next year. You can find pictures of the tomatoes over on our Instagram, and I think we might make a short little video about the tomato for over on YouTube as well. You can always find the links to our social media and stuff like that down in the show notes or on our website, seedsandweedspodcast.com. Now, before we jump into the interview, I do want to give a quick shout out to the folks over on our Patreon community. Now, without our members, we would not be able to continue making this podcast. So big thank you to all of the new and returning members, including Rebecca Schaefer and Emily Marsh. And if you enjoy the Seeds and Weeds podcast and would like to support our work, please consider joining our Patreon community. And you can learn all of the details and the perks, all the good stuff over at patreon.com/smallhousefarm. Sarah Thrush is a popular TikToker known for her passion for canning and preserving food. She shares her knowledge and experience on food preservation through her posts, videos, and recipes. She started her journey as a canner when she was only 8 years old, when she learned how to can and preserve food from her grandmothers and her mother. Today, Sarah's joining us on the program to talk about her brand new book, Preserving with a Purpose. Sarah, welcome to the show. I am so excited to be able to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I love these things.
Now, I really want to dig into this new book of yours, Preserving with a Purpose, but before we get into it, could you share with our listeners just a little bit about you and your background in food preservation?
Sure. So I call myself like a third generation canner, but I know it goes further back than that. I came from a family that always grew our food and preserved our food, canned our food. So that was kind of just a lifestyle that I grew up in. And I just assumed, I guess, that everybody kind of lived in somewhat of that lifestyle. And that was not the case when I made my very first canning TikTok, and it went viral and everybody was like, this is so cool. Can you teach us how to do this? That's kind of my background. I've just been teaching people how I've been living my whole life. We live on a small homestead. It's about 20 acres in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan with my husband, my kids, and all of our farm animals and everything that we do up here. And I do a lot of farmsteading or homesteading. We try to grow and produce as much of our own food as we can. And then I spend a good chunk of the year traveling around the country, teaching people how to do this, writing a book like I did with all the canning recipes in it, and just really trying to educate people on how to take back control over their food.
I dig it. You know, I think my favorite line in the book, it was something like, the most expensive food that we'll buy is the food that we throw away. That stuck with me.
Absolutely. And we have this huge problem in America where we have so many people that don't have enough to eat. And at the same time, we have more food waste than any other country. So how is that happening? How is it we have more food available to us than we've ever had before? And yet we're throwing away more and more people are hungry. And my hope in writing this book is that we can look at our food, where it comes from, and try to take back some of that control and try to make sure that we have that food security available for us and our families.
So let's just start with the basics here. You know, sometimes folks folks might be a little intimidated to get started with canning their own food. So real simple, how does somebody get started with canning? What kind of stuff do they need and why are they doing it?
Well, I think when you get started, the easiest thing to do is try to work with the resources you have. And for a lot of people, that's going to be water bath canning, because you can do water bath canning in any large pot. As long as it is large and deep enough to completely submerge those jars, you probably have a lot of what you already need on hand. And so I tell people, start with that. So you are making the smallest financial investment. And also those recipes tend to be easier, right? Making pickles or canning up fruit and fruit juices, those things seem to be a lot easier to start with, a lot less intimidating. And then from there, you can really get into, all right, how do I want to can other things? And most people, when they get started, they get real excited and they try to overdo it. I always say start with one or two basic recipes, master those recipes, get yourself familiar and comfortable, and then expand. That's the easiest way financially to get started. The reason people do it, and this is what I love about canning, is there's something for everybody. So whether that be you want to save money, or maybe you want to be more eco-conscious, or maybe you just have a food allergy in your household, or you can't have extra salt, or you can't have extra sugar, or, there's just so many reasons why people do this and get into it. So you can do this on a small scale as a beginner. You can do this on a large scale and put enough food on your shelves for your family to eat for an entire year. That's always our goal, is like grow season to grow season. So we want to make sure we have enough food to carry us into the next grow season. There's just something for everybody. And it's really easy to get started. If you start with water bath canning, there's not a big financial commitment.
So let's touch on that a little bit. For our listeners that may not be familiar, there's either water bath canning or pressure canning. And the pressure canning obviously requires a little bit more specialized equipment. But for the water bath canning, I know that there's only certain foods that are considered safe for water bath canning. So could you kind of just rattle off a few of those for us?
The food dictates the processing. So like you said, there's two main types. There's some other types too, but two main: water bath, pressure canning, and the food decides how it gets processed. So the water bath canning is going to be your fruits and any fruit products. So like jams, jellies, fruit juices, your tomato and tomato products, any of your tomato sauces or stewed tomatoes, all of those things, salsas, and anything that is pickled. You can pickle any vegetables. You can have pickled corn salsa or pickled Brussels sprouts. So you can take your vegetables in a water bath canner, but they need to be pickled. They need to have that high acid. And then your low acid foods are the things that get pressure canned. So that's like your meats, all of your chicken, your beef, your game. So if you're a hunter or a fisherman, you can do fish, and all of your vegetables that you don't want pickled. So say you just want corn in like a water base, you can do that in a pressure canner. So that's the two main types. And then the food decides which type you need to use. The way you know how to do that is you get yourself a canning book. So that was another main reason why I wrote the book that I wrote, because it really outlines how the food needs to be processed.
So you've got such a large social media following. Like you mentioned, you're speaking at events all over the country. What made you decide to sit down and write a book? And how did you even find the time to do that?
Honestly, I would have never written this book without my supporters, without my followers. So my main platform is TikTok. I got over 1 million on TikTok, and then I've got another 1 million kind of scattered between all the other platforms. But it was my TikTok supporters that were like, you need to write a book. Please get this in, something that we can put in our hands. The videos are great. We love the videos, but we need something we can put in our hands. And they really pushed me to do this. I don't think I would have done this on my own because, like you said, I really didn't have the time with everything else that I had going on. So it was them. This book is there because they pushed me to write this book.
Well, hats off to the TikTok folks then, because I'm so glad that you did this. I'm looking at it right now. It's 304 pages. There's beautiful photos. There's information. There's these breakout boxes. Now, the title of the book is Preserving with a Purpose. So what's the purpose?
I think the purpose is what the reader needs the purpose to be. But I think the main purpose that we're all looking at when we get into canning is, how can I eat better and how can I save money? I don't think any of us are going to the grocery store and leaving and being like, man, I got such a great deal today. My groceries were so affordable. We're all couponing. We're all trying to get sales. We're all trying to do these things. And the food keeps rising. Every time I leave there, I'm so sticker shocked, and canning can come to the rescue for that. And it's all about, like you said, the food we throw away is the most expensive. How do we take the resources we already have and make them last longer, make them stretch longer?
So I'm going to totally put you on the spot here. Like you said, there's 125 recipes in this book, but what is one of your favorite recipes from the book?
So nostalgia wise, I think my favorite recipe is in chapter 7. Chapter 7 is all of my grandmother's kitchen wisdom on how they survived the Great Depression when there was no food. And so in that chapter, I put my great, it's so old. And these pickles, it's a pickle recipe. It's a fermented sweet pickle recipe. And that recipe is one that my family makes every year. And so not only is it delicious, but it has such a unique taste to it. To be able to have that recipe and put that in that book, not only is the flavor amazing, but also just the memories and everything that is associated every time I open one of those jars. That is definitely my favorite.
That is super cool. You know, a lot of the work that we do here at Small House is all about that, those memories and the stories and the history of our food. So that really resonates with me. One of the recipes actually that caught my eye though was pickled black walnuts. I'm in Michigan too, just like you. So we got black walnuts. It's abundant, right?
Yeah, right.
Tell us a little bit more about these pickled black walnuts.
That recipe also goes back hundreds of years. On my dad's side of the family, they are English, and it was a dish that was served with like meats. And so it has almost like a A1 steak sauce flavor to it. I don't know how else to explain that, but you eat the entire walnut, the shell and everything, because the whole thing is edible. It needs to be sun fermented and all of these things. That is a labor intense recipe. That is one that I make probably once every 5 years. Okay. Because every time I make it, I'm like, I'm never making this again, but it is so delicious. And it's a great use of something like you said. We've got these black walnuts all over the place. And what do? They lay on the ground and then they start to rot and they start to stink. And, we really don't have a lot of uses for them unless you're, curing them and getting the walnuts out. So it is a recipe that's very old that was passed down again through generations of my family. It's just so unique. And so I tried to get recipes in there that were unique, that were also old and kind of fading from people's memories. But then I also put basic stuff in there. The whole book is just kind of a combination of these old, unique recipes and new recipes. There's also a lot of like world recipes in there. I don't know if you saw those, but like I do things like Korean beef or tamales or Peruvian sauce. I want to get the younger generation looking at it and going, hey, this just doesn't have to be pickles. Right? It doesn't have to be just jellies and jams. I can actually have meals on my shelves that I can grab at any time.
I saw the Peruvian sauce. I saw like there's apple ketchup, but then like I said, I mean, there's just like a straight up salsa. There's everything that you'd want in here. For the folks that are tuning in that are either brand new to canning, or maybe they haven't quite taken the leap into canning at all just yet, what advice do you have for them to get them started or to broaden their horizons?
I think first of all, get yourself a good book. Even if it's not my book, get yourself a good book or start following people on YouTube and TikTok and start looking at those videos and say, hey, I want to learn how to do that. And I want to learn from somebody that's already doing it. And then to get started, once you decide, hey, I want to learn how to can, then start making yourself a list of, okay, this is the supplies that I'm going to need. You may not start this year. That's fine. Start building up the equipment that you're going to need, the jars, the lids, things like that in the good books. And then say, okay, next year, you know what? I'm going to can one thing. I'm going to can tomatoes next year and just do that one thing. Learn that one thing that is going to lead to another.
That's fantastic advice. And I'm going to say, Sarah, I have read a lot of books in my days. And if I'm going to recommend a canning book to anybody, it's going to be this one. I'm telling you, this is fantastic.
That is 40 plus years of canning myself, plus hundreds of years of my family's canning. It's not stuff I've made up. It's stuff that came from the generations before me. And so I think it's really important to have that stuff in paper format that we have access to.
Love it. What are the links that folks are going to need so they can connect with you and get their copy of this awesome book?
Sure. So the book is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all of your major brand stores have it available online. And you can find me on TikTok. Primarily, it's Sarah Plain and Tall. And I have folders there of canning and food preservation and everything that we talk about in the book and out of the book is on TikTok. I also have a Facebook group called Peelies and Petals, and we do a lot of information sharing in that group. It is a private group, so make sure you answer the questions to get in. But primarily, if you want to watch my videos, YouTube, TikTok, and it's Sarah Plain and Tall.
I'm going to put all those links down in the show notes so folks can find them too. Preserving with a Purpose, Next Generation Canning Recipes and Kitchen Wisdom, the brand new book from Sarah Thrush, now available everywhere the books are sold. Sarah, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. That was awesome.
Yeah, thank you guys so much too. And to all the listeners out there, you can do this. You can do this. If this is something that you're interested in, this is a way generations of people have pulled themselves out of food poverty, and you can do it too.
Well, there we go, my friends, and here we are, the end of yet another show. Thanks again to Sarah Thrush for being our guest today, and to all of you for tuning in. Remember, if you enjoy the podcast and would like to show your support, you can always join our community on Patreon. You can find that link and so much more at seedsandweedspodcast.com. This show was edited and produced by all of us here at Small House Farm, and the music we're enjoying right now is some old funk from HD Studios. Thanks again for joining us, friends. I'm Bevan Cohen, and we'll see you next time. Howdy, friends. Bevan here. The Seeds and Weeds podcast is brought to you in part by our friends at Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. And while they're well known for their incredible selection of rare and unique heirloom seeds, they're also the organizers of the Heirloom Expo, which takes place every year in Ventura, California. Let me tell you what, this is an event that you do not want to miss. We're talking about 3 days of pure food fun. There's a huge seed swap, an expo hall with hundreds of beautiful heirloom veggies on display, vendors, workshops, presentations. It is something special, and I'll be there too. Join us at the National Heirloom Expo September 10, 11, and 12 in sunny Ventura, California. Find out more at theheirloomexpo.com.